The IMF is forecasting a growth rate of 6.2%, and I think that's reasonable. But the point that I'd always make is that it's meaningless to project GDP growth rates in China because GDP growth in China is really a political number. It's not an economic number. It tells us nothing about the economy. So if the government wants it to be 6.2, it'll be 6.2. If they want it to be 7.2, it'll be 7.2. Not because they're cheating on the numbers, but because the local governments are asked or encouraged to create as much economic activity as is necessary to achieve the target. So they'll achieve whatever target they want. Frankly, I don't really think there was any deleveraging. They call it deleveraging, but according to their numbers, debt continued to grow faster than nominal GDP, and it's a nominal GDP growth that you have to compare it with. So according to their numbers, there was no deleveraging. There was an increase in the debt burden. The rate at which things got worse improved slightly, but things continued to get worse. And then, of course, there are real problems with their numbers. Debt probably grew much faster than their account of debt. And more importantly, we think of GDP growth as the equivalent of growth in real wealth or growth in debt servicing capacity or growth in productive capacity. But as I suggested in the answer to the first question, that's not what GDP means in China. In China, GDP is a system's input, and it's the amount of activity that's generated by the system in order to meet the target. The real growth in China is less than half of the reported growth. So when you consider that, when you compare the growth in debt with the growth in debt servicing capacity, which is really what you should be comparing, there's been no leverage at any point along the time. So debt continues to grow, and indeed it has to grow if China is going to grow faster, or if China's GDP is going to grow faster than whatever the real underlying growth rate is. The main reason for the growth in debt in China, there are many reasons, but the main reason is really the unbalanced nature of demand within China. Because household income in China is so low, perhaps the lowest we've ever seen in history, consumption is very low. And for a large economy, there are basically two main sources of demand, consumption and investment. And with consumption so low, by definition, investment growth must be high to keep the economy growing. But China long ago reached the point at which most of the needed investment has been completed. So now a lot of investment in China is really non-productive. And as a result, debt is growing much faster than debt servicing capacity. Well, it's very straightforward. There's no secret to it. There's two ways you can raise consumption. The unsustainable way is with a growth in debt, consumer debt. The sustainable way is with a growth in household income. And in the last 3 to 4 years, we did see consumption growth pick up. But we also saw China go from one of the countries with the lowest amount of household debt to, by some accounts, one of the countries with the highest amount of household debt. So the growth in consumption in recent years has not been sustainable growth. It's been the wrong kind of growth, and it's already stabilizing. If it reduces taxes on business, it will have absolutely no impact on resolving China's problems. China's problem is really one of redistributing wealth, of redistributing income from local governments and local elites to the household sector. If they could reduce taxes on the household sector, for example, VAT taxes, things like that, that would be positive. That would affect the redistribution of income. It's a good thing in the sense that the very, very weak markets had created an enormous pessimism, and seeing the markets recover may help repair some of the pessimism. But you know, depending on foreign capital inflows is something that many developing countries have done in the past, and they've almost always regretted it, because foreign portfolio inflows come in very quickly on good news, but they leave very quickly on bad news. And so what that means is that capital flows introduce a new element of volatility to the Chinese economy, which it really doesn't need.